Two different brothers, one in Australia, one in South Africa. They both open the same page of a da'wah course. They call their Hindu friends from childhood over the phone, and they read from the top of that page to the bottom, and both Hindus took Shahada immediately. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الأمين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. أما بعد. So that story is a true story. I used to have this da'wah course and I used to skip that page because I believed it was self-explanatory. It just had a few points on it, on like logical questions to ask the polytheist, someone who believes in multiple gods, to get them to think outside of the box. So this is thinking outside of the box, part 2. This brother in South Africa opened that page, called a friend, and just went through the points, and at the end the guy took Shahada right over the phone. So I told this to the students in Australia, and the guy said the same thing happened to me. I opened the same page, called my Hindu friend, went from top to bottom, the man took his Shahada over the phone. Why am I telling you this story? I'm trying to tell you that this technique of getting people to step outside of the box, it works bi'idhnillah azza wa jal. It works. You get people to see that what they're doing is wrong. Like again, how can someone worship an idol they built with their own hands and they put food in front of every single day? They're never going to see that that's ridiculous and wrong unless you get them to step outside of their box. And sometimes I say their box because sometimes people have their own separate box, and you got to get them to step out and say, look at this. Does this make sense? And when they realize it doesn't make sense, everything's easy from there, insha'Allah azza wa jal. So how do I get the polytheist to step outside of the box? It's going to be the same technique. You're going to ask them questions to get to realize that it's wrong. The belief is wrong. The concept doesn't make sense. And that's the greatest thing about Tawheed. And it's the easiest number. Even philosophically, 1 is easier than 0. So one God, that's the easiest number. Multiple, we're going to have problems. So ask the following questions. So one thing you can ask, for example, is if there is more than one God, how do you know this? What's the proof that there is more than one God? What's your source? And this is another technique, but basically whatever source they're going to mention, as long as they don't say the Quran, you know it has flaws in it. So you can tear apart that source. But perhaps you're not familiar with the source. So then what do? So then you start to ask questions. How many gods are there? And it could be 7, it could be 6 million, as in some religions, it could be any number. The question is then, are these gods equal, all exactly equal, or are they separate and have different powers and strength? Either way, there's a problem. However they answer, there's a problem. If you say they have different, or like they have like this, one of them is really strong, he's got 60% of the power, one has 20%, the other has 20%, then the argument is, why would I even waste my time with the 20% God? I would focus on the 60% one, the one that has all the power. And as long as me and him are in good relationship, then I can ignore the other two. Now when they're upset on the day of judgment, they're like, no, he didn't worship us for 1 minute, let's get him. The big one's like, no. He's cool, he's with me. So now, what's the value of spending any time on the weak gods? That's one. What if they tell you, no, they all have the same strength and power and everything, but they have different jobs. One is the God of love, one is the God of anger and wrath and war, one is the God of, babies and what have you. Okay, suppose I don't want babies, and the God of wrath and war, it's going to take a lot of worship to make him happy. He's always angry all the time. So I'll focus on the God of love then, God number 2. And on the day of judgment, it would be a problem. Because for someone who worshipped God number 2 alone to go to the hellfire, what happens to all the worship he spent on God number 2? He doesn't get any reward for that? Does he partially go to Jannah for that? And then if he goes to Jannah, he completely ignored God number 1 and 3. There's no punishment for that? It's a problem, however you look at it. That's why one of the Christian scholars, he did a study, and he found out that Christians, the majority of them, love what they refer to as God the Son more than God the Father. Why? You can't love them equally. And that's why, even if you say they're equal in jobs, equal in power, equal in wisdom and knowledge and everything, people are going to love one more than the other, as we saw in the example with Christianity. They love Jesus more than God the Father. Why? Because God the Father was the angry God who could not forgive them until the sweet one came and said, I will give myself up for their sins. I love them so much. You see that? So it's never going to be equal. Even if you say they're equal in every way, what if let's say there are three gods that are equal in every way? Okay? God number 1, 2, and 3. But 80% of the world's population loves God number 2 more. What's going to happen to God number 1 and 3? Are they going to like be jealous of each other? He gets all the world. Let me do something nice for the people of this country. Make it rain gold on them so they love me. It's not going to work, people. It's not going to work. Let me tell you something. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala indicates to us in the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لَوْ كَأَنَ فِيهِمَا آلِهَةٌ. يعني Allah says, if there were in the worlds آلِهَةٌ, gods, dun Allah, besides Allah, لَفَسَدَتَا, they would have been corrupted. Allah tells us in the Quran, if there was more than one God, the heavens and the earth would have been corrupted. This one wants the sun to come out from here. This one wants the day to be this long. This one's had it with this group. Let me destroy them. The one was like, no, be patient. Like that. Now, let me tell you something. The ancient Greeks, who never heard this verse, they came to the same conclusion because it's logical. It's logical. The ancient Greeks never heard this verse that we just mentioned, but they knew that multiple gods would fight. Now you know what I'm talking about, right? When you look at Greek theology and you look at all the Greek gods and goddesses, and this one divorced that, it's a soap opera. This one was sleeping, this one put the poison in the I don't know what. Because even the Greeks realized that if there were more than one God, they would fight. It's exactly what Allah said in the Quran. So to tell me that there's more than one God, it's a problem. It's very, very problematic. Now, believe it or not, I'm aware of the fact that perhaps some of the stuff I've been saying, it wasn't really impressive. You were like, this is what you're selling us on in one page. Believe it or not, the arguments I just gave, as simple as they were the majority, of what was on that page. The ones the brothers read from beginning to end and the people took shahada over the phone. More or less. Okay, here's the thing about thinking outside the box. You're already outside the box. That's why it's not that impressive to you. You're already outside the box. You see? That's why Amr ibn al-Jamuh's action of trusting and giving the sword to the god or the idol made no sense to you because you're outside the box. This is a true story. I had two friends and they were good du'at. They went to a university giving da'wah for one day. And in one day, they gave up to 70 shahadas. In one day, up to 70 shahadas. And like I told you in another episode, it's doable. It's very doable, okay? But I asked them, how did you, this was in the old days. I didn't know how they did it. So how'd you do it? They said, well, we have a questionnaire. We give it, it's like 10 questions. We give it to people to fill out. By the time they hand in the questionnaire, we ask them, would you like to become Muslim? And they say yes. So I knew my purpose in life. All I have to do is find your questionnaire, get my hands on it. So I harassed them, emailing and calling them constantly. Where's the questionnaire? Give me the questionnaire. Finally, they sent me the questionnaire. I was so unimpressed by it that today I only remember the first question. I don't remember any of the others. It was so unimpressive. Why wasn't it impressive to me? Because I'm already outside the box. But the people filling it in, it got them to step outside the box. It was impressive to them. I remember the first question. The purpose of life is to A, worship the Creator. B, feed my dog. C, make money. D, something else ridiculous. And you circle 1. So number 1, you circle A. Question number 2 takes you in another direction. 3 in another direction. By the time you do question number 9 or 10, you're convinced that you should become Muslim. And then they hand it back in shame and they tell me, you ready to become Muslim? They say yes. They counted up to 70 shahadas in one day. So, now I know, don't try to get a hold of me and ask for a copy of the questionnaire. I don't have a copy of the questionnaire. Use the same logic. There's someone that, one time in a class I was mentioning this, and someone actually made up their own questionnaire and the same idea. Just experiment with these things. But the questionnaire wasn't impressive to me, I'm outside the box, but for them it got them to step outside of the box. Questions like, what is the purpose of life? You will not believe how many people are shocked when they hear that question. It gets them to step out of the box because they never thought of that question. You knew it and you've heard it so many times, you've known it your whole life. But to them, let me tell you something. I had some friends, they made a big sign that said, what is the purpose of life? And they put it near the main road and they had their da'wah table with pamphlets and everything. They said people would slam on their brakes. You see what I said? I didn't say stop their cars and come out. They would slam on their brakes and run to them and say, what is the answer to this question? I've been thinking about this my whole life. What's the purpose of life? Yeah? So these things, these simple questions get them to think outside of the box, and they're not impressive to you. So believe it or not, yeah, these arguments that we gave about how the gods split their power. If someone tells you all the gods are exactly equal in power, in wisdom, in strength, the question becomes, how did they do that? Like, was there a bigger force that made them give up their powers, or were they all made exactly like that? How did they all have exactly the same powers? Or was there a meeting and they decided, look, God number 2, you're too smart. 60%, you're too smart for your own good. And God number 3 is not that bright. Give him some of your intelligence. And he's strong, he'll give you some of his muscle. Was there a meeting like that where they had a decision? When I moved to the United States, the first man to ever invite me to his house was actually a devil worshipper. He wasn't aware of it. He thought he was in communication with multiple gods. And I told him, Allah says in the Quran that if the world had more than one God, the heavens and the earth would have become corrupted. He said, no. They use something called collaborative leadership. Yeah, collaborative shaitanship maybe, okay, but not leadership. Anyways, so we're saying getting people to think outside the box. Very, very powerful technique. You do it by, not like in the days of Umr al-Jamuh, you're not going to break anything or hide anything. You're going to do it by asking people questions that will get them to think, get them to step away from their belief system and see what's wrong with it. At the end of the first episode, I spoke about the rat temple. And you can find this online if you just write rat temple in India. And you see this man eating chapati with the rats and sitting with the rats, and the rats are all over the place, tens of thousands of them, and he thinks he's doing something holy. But when you look at him, you just see a man breaking bread with rats. How can I get him to realize he's just a man breaking bread with rats? By these questions that get him to step outside of the box. A very, very useful technique. Instead of 2-3 hours debating back and forth, quoting from the Gospels, within a few minutes, ask about the concept. When they realize this concept makes no sense and there's something wrong with it, you're done. Now what? Low point, high point. So I destroyed the Trinity. What do I do now? What's the high point? Nothing on this planet is like Tawheed. It is so easy. It is so digestible. It makes so much sense. One God, indivisible. One time, we were sitting with this priest, and we said, which concept makes more sense? The Islamic concept. I'm not asking you which one you like more. I'm not asking you which one do you believe in. I'm saying which one makes more sense and is easier to comprehend and digest. One God who is indivisible, who has no partners or children or grandchildren or anything like that. Or the Christian concept of 3 gods that are physically separate, but they're still one. One of them dies for 3 days instead of becoming 2, they're still one. And all that, which one? And he just stayed quiet. And again, I quote him. He said, the one that is more intellectually satisfying is the Islamic version. So again, use this technique, even develop it further, and use it in places that, as a tool, I never even mentioned. Come up with your own usages for this. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless your efforts. Jazakumullah khair for your attentive listening. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Wa sallallahu wa barak ala Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.